It's so cool. Like, aside from this alone, just to see someone brown, right, in that space, in that super high-end, elegant space, it's just amazing.
I didn't think that's what like life would become. You know what I mean? Like I didn't think that that's what I would be like known for, or that's sort of work I'd be doing in the long run. I always thought maybe like I would stop at some point, you know, like who does anything like that for 12 years or 15 years or however long it's been. But, you know, here we are, right? Like,
yeah, can't stop, won't stop. Let's start off with the intro. Like, tell us who you are and what do you do?
My name's Atif KAZMI. I am the founder of Homme. It's a digital media company based out of New York, and also a creative marketing agency called Networkgray. What I do, I help brands tell their stories. I mean, it's always been sort of about that since day one, and hopefully inspire people and influence people along the way.
So we'll get into more details about what you actually do day to day, because I think people should know what you do, because it's super cool and super different from from the norm. But before we get into that, like, growing up, was being a doctor or being part of one of those traditional paths, like a lawyer or engineer, was that part of your path? Like, did your parents ever pressure you to do one of those things?
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said that was never like mentioned, right? But I think, you know, growing up, I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs, right? And in that process, you sort of like, there's a conflict in my mind about, one was, hey, you're telling me to do something, but you're not doing it.
Yeah.
And obviously there are so many other layers to that. As you grow up, you're like, okay, yeah, there's so many like societal and like financial burdens or sort of responsibility to come on that didn't allow my parents to do those things, right? Or my uncle, or whoever, or anyone else. No one ever shoved it down my throat though. No one ever was like, sat me down and was like, hey, you know, you're going to school for this thing, or you're interested in this thing, don't do it. It was never like that. But I do remember, you know, moments of my dad just like casually like, yeah, man, you should be a doctor. Like, you know, oh, you're really good at arguing, you should be a lawyer. You know, like that was said to me. I remember vividly. It was like we were in a heated conversation, heated argument, and he just stopped and he said that. And I mean, to be honest, I went to school for economics and political science. So for me, it was like, there's, no one knows this, right? It's like, probably no one knows this, but like, you know, I went for econ poli sci. So for me, in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm either going to go into iBanking or I'm going to go into law, you know? And I probably would have ended up in law, I think, you know, or iBanking. But I think when I was graduating, which was like 2009, I mean, that was right after a financial collapse had happened. Yeah. And so I was already going through this like sort of like restructuring in my mind about what my future looks like, right? And where can I immediately jump into that will sort of won't be shaky grounds, right? It won't be like, you know, because if I went into finance, even if I got an offer, I had friends that were getting offers in 2008 that were just rescinded. Every single person.
Oh shit.
Stearns, UBS. I mean, I had contacts with UBS, but no one's answering phone calls. Yeah. And then on the other end of it, you know, I had folks that were like graduating from like really great law schools and they weren't getting gigs, you know, they weren't getting jobs. Like, forget the like bigger opportunity, just even smaller ones, just nothing was happening. And so I looked down like, oh, that does not, those areas do not look like what I want to jump into. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so,
it's funny that time that time made you think that way for careers that are normally considered to be like good, stable, well-to-do jobs.
Yeah,
it's wild.
But you know what? Maybe I was wrong, right? Because maybe I didn't think about it like, all right, 4 years ahead, the world's gonna be a much better place, right? Like everything will be fine in 4 years, inshallah. And so I didn't think about that. But to me, I was like, I don't got 4 years. You know what I mean? Like I was at the time, I'll tell you, my mindset was always about like just movement. It was always like, I need to continue to progress in income. And so I had this like really, some people might call it aggression, or some people might call it, you know, ambition, or whatever you want to label it. Whatever it was that was fueling me, at the time I was so ignorant to the moment. I was always worried about the future, you know, and
Yeah.
that had its own issues. Like there's so many problems that arose because of that. And it took me a long time to really understand the moment, right? Like to really
Yeah.
value like this conversation right now, to be really in it and nothing else, you know? It took a long time.
It is something that it's funny that you say that. It's just something I've been thinking about a lot the past couple of months, and the importance of being present in what it's always good to plan and think ahead, obviously, but you can't sacrifice like being in the moment and being present in whatever it is that you're doing, right? Whether it's something like this interview or the work that you're doing, time you're spending with your family, like you need to be present. Otherwise, you just keep looking back and regret, like, oh, like I was there, but I never was really there. And actually appreciate what you're going through. So it's funny that you say that. But I think that it's unfortunate, but some of these things just come with age, and wisdom like comes with time. And then you're like, shit, I wish I was this wise like 10 years ago. But obviously then that's never going to happen.
Never going to happen. But I think that this is where like it also, that's why conversations like this are important also, because ultimately, right, why we're even having this convo is about like us never having this 10 years ago.
Yes,
right?
100%.
To us to like someone actually calling us or like talking to us or giving us some sort of wisdom that looked like us, to say, hey, by the way, these are hurdles that are coming up. And you know, I have gone through like this period of reflection for, I would say, the last like 1 or 2 years, where maybe it's because like, you know, career wise I'm now starting to gain some stability, you know, and I've gone through a huge run of not having that. And because of that stability, I've now reflected and I've said, okay, I'm doing a lot for myself, or my family, or whatever it might be, but am I putting enough out there? Am I sharing enough of it with the world? Am I like dedicating time to things that aren't transactional, right? Like most like working or business relationships are transactional. You're being paid, or you're being, you know, whatever it might be. You're trading that for doing X, Y, and Z. And so I'm like, okay, let's remove that. Let's remove that from the equation. Like, all right, let's just pretend I have plenty of that. And are there things that I can do where I don't need anything, you know? And I tend to like, you know, you and I, we converse all the time. I'm sure we talk about folks where we don't want anything in return, but am I doing it enough? Am I like, you know, doing it in a very purpose-driven manner where like, I'm just giving whatever I can, whether it's like feedback or, you know, conversation, anything.
Dude, I think that level of awareness, and also I guess a combination of like empathy and compassion is so sweet and so needed, and I don't think that there's enough of it yet. What I've seen a lot of times, which is unfortunate, is like people reach a certain point or they get to a certain place, and because of the way society is, and a lot of times it's very competitive, that people want to protect what they've got and not share it. And that's something that I even learned from Atif, my brother, early on, that he said that, yo, if you were actually really good at what you do, you should share the wealth, because giving doesn't take anything away from you, but it is bringing other people with you. And if you want to think it competitively, the more competition you have, the better you're going to be. Technically, right? If you want to think of it in a competitive way, like you want to play, like, you know, Jordan's not going to want to play with scrubs all the time and make himself. He wants competition. Like he wants to compete to be better. But it's not even about competition. It's more about just giving. And I think that, like, I mean, I personally believe that the more you give, that technically in some way it will come back to you. But that's not even why that you should do it. I like that you said just giving for the sake of giving, because that's what it should be.
Yeah, and I'd be lying if I said that it's just for somebody else, right? It really, there is something inherently beautiful about giving.
Yeah.
Like it's good for your soul, dog. It's just, that's just the reality of it, you know?
It is.
And that part is the part, and it sounds, and so I love helping other people, and I don't want anything in return. You won't ever tell, like, you never hear me list off things I've done. We don't have to even get into it. You know what I mean? If I did something for you, like, you might remember it. I probably don't. You know what I mean? And vice versa. And I assume that, yes, I will always remember the people that have helped me, right? And they probably don't. They probably don't care.
That's true. You never know.
And they probably don't, you know, but for me, it's like, you know, that's an important element of it. But what I'm learning is, man, it's just like, to really have a fulfilling life and to have like an amazing, like when you look back, you know, when you sit down on like Sunday evening right? And you think about the week ahead and the week before, and you
Yeah.
talk about, all right, fine, we close this many deals, or we finish this many projects, you
Yeah.
know, I spent this much time with my family, and like I saw my friends and all these different things. And then you just say, oh yeah, I had this conversation, or like this person responded to me, or like sent me a thank you note, or whatever. Like little things like that, I just feel like just give you a more full, you know, sort
It's
of
more
like
meaningful.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
It sort of makes everything else even more worth it. Like, it's like, all right, yeah, like I'll keep doing this because now I know that someone's actually sort of like,
See, like what you're saying, it is really meaningful. And I think to give a little context, I will just say selfishly, if I was like a young kid and I found you either on Instagram or whatever and saw what you were doing, I would not see, like, this is why I really wanted you to be on this, is because I think kids need to see, like, yo, someone who looks like you, someone who's come from like the same upbringing, it doing something that I didn't think was possible. Like, when I was a kid, I was really into cars, for example. And like, that is something that you are at the pinnacle of you're at the places that I didn't even imagine that people who look like me can get there, right? And that's where you are with people and cars that we will only see in photos and magazines, right? And you're taking these photos and you have them. Is it appropriate to call part of what you do is you're running like a digital magazine, right? Is that like, I don't want to simplify it, but like to me, that's how I would see it, and that's how I would describe it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that was always the move. It was always from day one. It was like, hey, let's create a digital online magazine that is luxury, it's contemporary. It's like the online version of GQ, and that didn't really exist. Like if you look back in 2008 when we first started, like Esquire.com and GQ.com looked like shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was just really, it's really bad. And they knew it, and they went through several iterations. They tried to fix it. And maybe eventually they have now, you know, but I think that, you know, at the time, that was a big catalyst. It was like, okay, like what I want and the content that I want out there, it just doesn't exist. And like you, I've loved cars since I was like a kid. You know, I remember like sitting in my mama's lap driving a car when I was like 2 years old. It's, and not that you remember that, it's like I have flashbacks to it. You know what I mean? I have like flashbacks to like, you know, small car, you know, classic cars and little toys and stuff. And I don't know, I just feel like when I look back, cars have been like, I don't know, they've moved me the most. Yeah. And now, you know, what started off as just like sort of an interesting has ballooned into much more. And I'm, you know, I'm just, I don't know, I'm on for the ride.
They move you the most when you were a kid, and now they're moving you the most all over the world. I mean, literally, right now everything's on pause, but like that's one of those things that I would love for someone to like hear this and know that like you might read a magazine or read an article online, and I remember reading those things and I never thought that that's something that I could do or it was possible for like just a kid like me to do. But then your story is exactly that. Like you're doing what I think most, like, well, not most, I don't know about most anymore. I don't know what kids are thinking about now, but for sure, like this idea of what you're doing is to me, like, so like if you were to like talk to the 15-year-old or 10-year-old self, like what would you say? Like, how would you think that kid would react? Like, would he be happy with what you're doing and where you're at?
I hope so. You know, I think number one, you know, the 15-year-old me would have been like, damn, so you didn't make it to NBA? Right? That would have been like the first thing that happened, right? And
damn, kids are never satisfied.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it just would not, you know, that would be the first thing. Because at 15, that's what I was like, oh my God, I'm great. But I never put the work in for it. I was just like, I want to do it. And that's why I look at my little cousins who are like so into basketball and they want to do that type of stuff. I'm like, listen, you got to put the work in. You know what I mean? And you got to like wake up early. You got to get to weights. You got to do all those things because that's what's going to get you. And this is me like having seen it now.
Yeah. With the wisdom.
2020. Yeah, right? Like all this shit. But really, you know, that's sort of like the first thing that would happen. The second thing I think would be like, all right, damn, so you're around, like you around cars all the time? Like, I know we do more than that, but like that would be enough
a lot
for
more
me
than
to do
that.
everything else. Yeah. And I think the car part is, I think it has allowed me to do so much more, right? Like I think the automotive stuff was definitely one of the biggest like pushes. Fashion was also really big. Like we were one of the first sites in New York to be covering men's fashion. Like no one cared about us. Nobody cared about guys in the early 2010s.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But when like New York Fashion Week happened, and then like, remember what was that thing, like that whole what was the Fashion Week thing that used to happen? What was like Fashions Night Out? Do you remember that?
Yeah. Something like that. It's been a way.
Yeah, it was like, yeah, right. And like that whole thing, like we were around for that. We were like at the inception of that, and then came, men's Fashion Week became its own thing. All these things happen. We were witnesses to it, and so to tell stories around this stuff, and to then, go from like me being a fan of like Highsnobiety and like Selectivism and Complex to now be able to say, hey, these are our partners or our colleagues, right? Like I'm at one point we're in the same network as Highsnobiety, and like Hypebeast, and we converse with them on a regular basis. I mean, these type of things happen all the time, and it's like, this is just like become our reality, from that standpoint.
Yeah.
And so and I remember when I first started Pour Homme. Pour Homme started in 2008 from my dorm room. I mean, I literally just put like a WordPress site up just to get the ball rolling, And I used to like, just do this every single night. My friends would come over, like, what the heck are you up to? And then like it started to, I think, like pay dividends. Like financially, it took many, many years. I think from like a respect or like from a notoriety standpoint, it took a couple of years, right? So imagine doing something every single day, night, 8 to 10 articles yourself every single day, not asking for, maybe that's why I'm so used to not asking for anything in return, is because for
you weren't
3 or
getting
4
anything.
years, I wasn't getting anything. You know what I mean? And I remember like, man, so much had happened. I remember in my life that I would dedicate hours every single day still to doing this. And that part to me was like, maybe that's why I'm now comfortable to do that all the time. Like any business I start, anything that we sort of launch, I'm in it to weather the storm, because I know that in the beginning it takes time, and you can't cheat that. There's no way to cheat that,
It's so funny you say that, because I think that sometimes nowadays it's just a product of the world we live in with social media and stuff like that, that people just see a lot of final products and they don't always see the struggles and journey, right? So like they might see you and think like, oh man, this dude started this, and then, this is how it's been the whole time. You don't realize that the years and years of work that go into it with no return. So you're trying to find ways to keep it going without it being financially stable or whatever, just hoping that one day it will be. But it's the whole point of what you said. You got to put in the work, and you gotta be patient, and you have to find ways to sustain it until it gets to the point where it can sustain itself, and then hopefully one day it sustains you.
That's the hope. And like I think, right. And there's a moment of it, like, look, it's the ultimate leap of faith, right?
Yes.
I look back at my history, right? I look back at like when I left corporate, it was the ultimate leap of faith. That's why I always sort of refer to it.
So what were you doing before where you moved full time to this?
Yeah.
What were you doing?
So I'll run it back real quick. So the timeline was that I was an undergrad. I graduated in 2009.
Yeah.
Hunting for jobs. I ultimately pivoted and said, you know what? I had this website. I started putting my resume, because we garnered over like 100,000, 120,000, unique visitors per month in a matter of 12 months.
Oh, that's really good.
Right from launch to like right before graduation, like we were already over 100,000 visitors. So like, again, that was good.
Yeah.
I put down my resume, et cetera. And then we essentially, started applying to jobs that were in the world of advertising. I started applying to marketing gigs, advertising gigs, like mobile analyst or data analyst at an advertising company. And so my first gig was like this like contractor role. I interviewed at business.com in California, in Santa Monica. They flew me out for a final interview. Yeah. Flew me out for a final interview. I remember like the head of marketing in the garage as I was walking in, there's a GTR. And back in 2009, the GTR had just come out, right?
Yeah,
so it was like a big deal.
Yeah.
And that was one of my favorite cars at the time. And
Godzilla.
He had, bro, straight up. And it had a baby seat in the back. I'm like, this guy's like living his best life. Yeah. And so I like end up going to the interview. Everything goes well. They call me back a couple of days later and say, hey, listen, we want you, but this is more of a junior role. It's not like an entry level role, and they don't feel comfortable giving it to somebody fresh out of college.
Yeah.
So long story short, we stay in touch. You know, I work like part-time elsewhere for a bunch of months, you know, trying to like just make ends meet or whatever. And then ultimately, like, I get a phone call a couple months later from the same person saying, hey, we have a contractor role that's in Denver. You've got to move out, you know? And I did it. I did it for like 6 months. I came back and I got down my resume to kind of get the ball rolling.
Yeah.
And then, you know, ultimately it was kind of like mutual benefit. I mean, it was mutually that it was going to work out, because I was so disconnected from that work. You know, I was so like just not into it, because I was far from home, number one. And number two, it just, the culture of the company just wasn't the vibe.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I was the only brown person in the entire company. And it really, I think, I don't know, it just wasn't, it didn't feel like valuable to me. You know?
Yeah.
But at the same time, having that on my resume for the first job that I got in New York as an analyst at a display advertising company, I remember talking to my senior, you know, like my boss, like months later, like as we were walking to lunch, I was like, hey, listen, like if I didn't have that on my resume, what would have happened? He was like, I probably wouldn't have hired you. Because I was competing with somebody else who had similar experience, but I just liked you more. That's literally what he said to me, you know, but he couldn't even like me more if I didn't have that on my resume. Right.
Yeah.
That's like a secondary element. That's like a tiebreaker, but also you gotta have some experience. So that really did benefit me a lot. And it was worth taking that leap to say, all right, I'm going to move out to Denver, man, far from family, whatever. I'm going to do that and just see what happens. And I ultimately did that, you know, and it kind of worked out.
That's what, that's what you said. Part of putting in the work. You might not have wanted to do that, but it's still, you got to put in the work. So you're doing that, and now you're back in New York and you have a job. Then where do you go from there?
Yeah, so now I have a gig. I'm working full time in the city, and I'm like commuting from Jersey back to city, Jersey back to city. And on my commutes, I'm working on Porsche. Right, so my laptop, got the Wi-Fi popping. Like I do a whole thing. That's where my time. That's why I was like, I'm not worried about living in the city. I was like, I got all this time that I can literally dedicate to this.
Yeah,
you know?
Focus.
So like, you know, hour or two on the way out, hour or two on the way in. Both things sort of dedicating to it. Lunch breaks, everything. I mean, because I would start, you know, nowadays, like if you look at my email, I probably get like 400 emails a day. You know, and back then I know it sounds crazy. I just spoke to someone like a couple weeks ago, and they're like, you got like zero your inbox. I was at like 50, 60, 70,000. No, actually I was at 120,000 emails unread because there's so many. Now I'm doing a better job. If I show you right now, I'm at 46, which is like,
that's
pretty
progress.
Impressive. Yeah. Like
that's progress.
You know, that won't last long, because like even yesterday I didn't look at my phone for a couple hours and I was already up to like 300. So like, I know that it can get crazy. But I try to stay on top of it, you know, try to get better at it. But, so I ultimately, you know, use that time to work on Porum. I did that for 2 years, and I went from that advertising company to being poached by a partner of ours who was doing specifically social media advertising. So instead of doing display and email marketing, I shifted over to doing social media strategy in a more client-facing role. So it was like an account manager. You know, I was the first like account manager in New York for the company, for the agency. They're a London-based company. And so I did that for a couple of years, you know, and I ultimately left corporate after that, you know. But I don't talk about the contract role too often, like the whole Denver trip. But I think it's important because I think because the part, I know we talk about like doing the work and stuff, you've sometimes got to do shit that's gonna make you uncomfortable, right? You gotta do it
always.
We're like, and you've got to get stuff on your resume. You've got to do it. If you're looking for, if you're thinking, hey, I need to build my career, and especially now in this climate where like things just aren't happening, and someone gives you a shot and says, yo, you gotta move for like however long, and maybe it's, you know, indefinite, like go do it.
You gotta do it.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, unless you have like some major family sort of limitation. I just don't see no reason why you shouldn't do it, you know? And I want to make sure I make that part clear, because obviously, you know me, like I've gone through many family things, and I would never trump career over that, you know? But if like, alhamdulillah, everything's good on that front, you know,
then do it.
Go do it. Yeah.
See, it's important, because you never know what opportunity can bring you the next thing. Like, it's good that you're saying that, because you shouldn't be so narrow-minded thinking like, oh, I don't want to be in Denver and I don't 100%. That's not what I really want to do. But it might be the perfect stepping stone to take you to the next step, which takes you to the next step, and then takes you to that train ride where you start working on your own stuff. And then whatever, how many years later, you're doing well enough where you can quit your corporate job and do what you want to do.
People have no idea, but like, you know, when I was working at Daytran, which is now Pulse Point Media, that's the first company I worked at in New York. Like halfway through that, I think I got a phone call or email from Esquire asking if I want to become the next like head online style editor.
Ooh, yeah.
Essentially the role that Josh Peskowitz had left, you know, to go elsewhere. And if people know who Josh Pesco is, like he's like a style men's like icon now.
Yeah.
And especially he's well known in the media landscape. But they wanted me to sort of take that over. But the ultimate, like the part that sort of like was the deciding factor on why I didn't do it was because they wanted me to get rid of Homme, right? They wanted me to like get rid of it, right? Yeah. And so when that happened, I was like, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. And by the way, at that time, I was making zero money from it. I was making nothing from it. It wasn't like one of those things, but I just saw too much opportunity. I said, you know what? Like, I can't imagine. I'd be so regretful if I had done that, you know, and then God forbid that doesn't work out, right? 6 months later, because they were like super inconsistent at the time, and they probably still are, but like, why jump onto a ship that's so like, so shaky?
Yeah.
And you know, I'd rather, if I'm the captain of the ship, it's one thing, right? Like I'm very okay with like running a media company for 13 years, 12 years that has been up and down.
Yeah.
You know, but it's like, if that's not in my control, then, you know,
it goes down, you're going down with it.
Yeah. At least, you know, as just like a passenger going down for the ride. You know, I'd rather say, yo, as the captain went down, you know?
Yeah. So you tried your best, because you can't even do anything about it when it's going down. So like in doing it, do you remember like a pivotal moment where you felt like that thing went from like a hobby to something that can be like real long term? Or did you always in your head have it that this could be something real? Not just real, like something that you can actually do.
Yeah. So I always knew I wanted to leave corporate eventually.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was right under my nose the entire time. I didn't know that like it would be Porum that would do it.
Oh,
ultimately.
Interesting.
In the beginning, in the first couple of years, I didn't think that. And then like, I think around 2014, I was looking into different like, you know, media networks and ad networks. And, you know, a lot of people use like Google, you know, they had, what was it, like AdWords and stuff. And so we didn't want to do that. We felt like that would really dilute the value of the content that we were creating, like, you know, to have like Google ads running everywhere. And instead we were looking at like more premium networks. They were paying higher CPMs. We thought we had a more valuable audience, which I, you know, totally agree with. Obviously that is one of our like foundational elements, is that we have a really strong audience that's a bit more affluent, right? And we have the data to show it. And so with those things, we just felt like, hey, we should go after a major network. And one network that popped up in my mind was Complex Media, right? And this was a company, right? And so Complex, that's how we started working on Complex, you know, reached out. I can't remember if we reached out to them or they reached out to us. I might've done the first like email or whatever, you know? And after that, I remember like having breakfast with like the CEO of, you know, Rich Antonelli of Complex, and we became really good friends. And like, you know, we bought into the network, and we really not financially, but just like we really, you know, sort of invested into the network and said, these are going to be our exclusive media partners. You know, these guys are going to run all of our ads, all of our sales, etc. That was a major moment, because even though we weren't making a lot of like revenue, it helped us to drive some like validity, right? Being in a major network, that was super huge. And then the second thing I would say is like, you know, there was a PR agency that hit us up, and they had repped like Dockers and Levi's, and they invited us to like a fall preview. And at that time, we were getting good traffic, but like once we did that and we covered that and a whole bunch of other sites picked it up, that was like a really big catalyst to say, okay, this is going to be something, and maybe there's an opportunity. And so then the dollars started to come in, I think around the complex partnership. And then we had some external things that happened over the next like year or two after that, where not that we were making like crazy bank, but I started to think like, all right, maybe if we can sustain this, it could be something, you know? And when I ultimately decided to leave corporate, I had no money saved, you know, I had nothing. I mean, really, and we had like some money coming in from the site. And so that was like the ultimate leap of faith. It was really like, let's just do this and see what happens. And I had some runway, you know, just like from like severance and those type of things. And when that ran out, right? Like when that money ran out, it ran out. And I swear one day I was on LinkedIn looking for new jobs. Kid you not, I had like a 2-3 month runway, you know? And I remember like looking at jobs, and I maybe turned away from my laptop, and I get a phone call. No, I get an email from an agency we were doing some work with, and they're like, hey, we have like this video campaign that we want to run on your site for like 3 months. We'll pay you like X amount for the next 3 months. And at that moment, that was the moment where I was like, okay, I'm going on my LinkedIn, I'm updating it to say I'm not looking for work. I'm not like, I'm making it very clear that now I've left corporate and that this is what I'm doing. And that was the moment, that was a switch. And it wasn't to say I was gonna make a bunch of bank. It was like, it was gonna be enough money for me to cover my expenses, my credit card bills.
Keep you moving.
You know, bills. That's it. That's all I cared about. In my mind, I remember literally, I might have a note on my app still. I might still have a note on my app that just ran down my minimum expenses, right? Of like, hey, this is how much it's gonna cost me to survive this month and next month. And that's all I cared about. We ended up having that year, to me, I left corporate, you know, in like January, the first week of January, like New Year's hit, my birthday hit, I reflected, I said, I'm leaving corporate. And then I come back, I'm done with doing that. You know, runway probably ran out, went to zero probably in like March or April. And then that contract came in, the opportunity came in for 3 more months, right? That got me towards the end of summer. And, you know, we ultimately had one of our best years that year. And
that's amazing.
I thought it was going to be like, I thought it was going to be flat. You know, I thought like career wise, I thought I was taking a pay cut, you know, and that was a lie. I didn't think I was going to make any money that year. I made money, you know, and like the following year was like a monster year. And I think the year after was also pretty strong. And then the entire advertising landscape shifted. And so we had to really pivot fast. And we were already doing some consulting work, some content work, whatever. But we really had to then become very, very deliberate, you know, about what the vision of this entire conglomerate looks like, you know. And now it's still like, it's still privately held. I still own like all of it. But I met my now co-founder of Networkgray, of our agency, you know, in passing at a fashion trade show, actually at Liberty Fairs. You probably worked.
Oh damn,
And like, right? And like,
probably.
And I literally met. No, straight up. And so you were probably on a project there. I was there walking the floor. And I remember, you know, him reaching out to me just in email. He had a brand that he was trying to pitch and stuff. And so I remember the vibes were really dope. Like I remember his like lookbook, everything looked really dope. And I was like, this guy's really cool. And I never responded to it. And I didn't respond to it because obviously I get 300-400 emails a day. And I was like, I'm never going to have time to talk to the guy, but hopefully I'll get back to it. I'm on Instagram. I'm like scrolling through the Explore feed. And one of his images popped up. I click in, I'm like, wait, that looks familiar. I click in and I see that it's his brand. And then I found him through that, and I realized that he's at the show. So I'll shoot him a message, say, hey, listen, I'm at the show, my bad for not responding, but if you're around, would love to link up. And, you know, come to find out, he's like Muslim. He lives like 20 minutes away from where I live. You know, we've got some mutual friends.
Shit.
Yeah. So we became homies. Like we forgot about the whole work part and the website, you know, all that, the content part. We just sort of became friends. And then 6 months later, you know, we launched Networkgray together. And so that's sort of how it all went down. And it couldn't have come at a better time because just advertising dollars just took a massive like hit. And this allowed me to sort of sustain, you know, some of those drops. And we started just working. We were just working on small projects here and there. And then now, you know, like 4 or 5 years later, like here we are, you know.
So you're for that part of it, you're making content for other brands, right?
Yep.
That's what you have. That's amazing. And on this side, you're making content for yourself, for your magazine.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Dope.
And like, and it's a crazy, sort of 1-2 combo, but one feeds the other, right? Because through the media work, as we get more like content out there, brands have hit us up. We work with like obviously several auto brands on projects and things like that.
You're being real humble. You should drop some names so people know what to aspire to. If you don't do it, I'm going to end up doing it in your intro. I'm just gonna be like, yo, he's not going to talk about any of these brands, but you need to know what he's got, like what he's working with. Like, that's like a good way to look at like, yo, if he's working with these brands, like I want to do this, or like, I wish I could do this.
There's no wishing in it. It's like
Porsche,
you can do
Bentley, Rolls-Royce. Yeah. Come on.
And yes, check. But like, BMW, Benz, like we can go through the entire list. But it's also super important. I think the reason we work with those brands is that I have always kept a very tight leash on like not only my personal brand, but like the type of content we create. Right.
Yes.
I've always tried to make sure that we don't dilute that, because like, the luxury landscape is different, man. From a mass market product to a luxury product to like a premium ultra luxury product.
Yeah.
Those are all three different sort of worlds. And, if you're playing in all of them, chances are you shouldn't be playing in two of them at least, right? Like,
yeah.
And so that's where like, I think a lot of the dissection starts to happen, but you really have to think about it in like this like long tail approach, right? You've got to think 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead in that regard of like, yo, like you've got to keep such a tight scope on the type of like brands you partner with and the conversations you want to have, because that ultimately will end up guiding, right? What the brand or the person at the brand is going to, is going to say about you or feel about you, right? Like, so the reason a lot of times when we think about like, one of the coolest things we ever done is like we did a photo shoot with the Lamborghini Aventador Roadster, right? Yeah. And like mouthful, but like Lamborghini Aventador Roadster. We did one around, right? And we did one around Fashion Week a bunch of years ago. This is after I left corporate. And I shot the whole thing, helped like style and model, whatever. We got her out of like New York City. We did this entire shoot. It came out really, really good. And I used that as a case study. I used it as a case study to say, hey, we just did this thing with Lamborghini. Like,
I think I remember that too.
You might, I was, man, you might just see me pushing it. I don't know. I had.
Dude, that's what you got to do. You got to push it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so that's the part that I always tell people is like, I get a chance to create the content, but I get a chance to like be a voice in how it's perceived, right? Like I get a chance to like write the reviews, write the conversations, write the storytelling, and those things allow all the dots to connect. It all comes back together in this really like unique, and like hopefully authentic way. I don't agree with something that I don't think I'm gonna like vibe with. If a brand hits me up and says, "Hey, we're like taking you to Ibiza, for X, Y, and Z brand," and the work is not my like vibe, I say no, because ultimately that one thing might take me away from the other 10 that I do vibe with, right? Yeah. Like, McLaren's not gonna say yes to me if I'm doing something, half-assed somewhere else, and that's a very, very important thing. It's that's like,
See, that's good with playing the long game to understand that you got to stay true to your brand. And the word you use, authentic, is really important, because I think that that's something that inevitably people can smell bullshit and they'll know bullshit. Oh. So if you're just doing things for the sake of doing it, or like you're diluting your brand because you want to do X, Y, and Z or whatever it is, like people will know, and you're going to lose audience and you're going to lose people's attention, because they're not going to vibe with you, because they're like, yo, this dude's fake. He's just going to bounce around wherever he could get a check or something like that. And that's, and it's true that authenticity really matters in these things. It really matters, especially in the long run.
It does. I think it matters when you're trying, if we've always said, our mission is to like inform, educate, and ultimately inspire, right? Yeah. Those are three main elements that we've always cared about. So yes, we want to inform people, we want to educate them on new things, et cetera, details, whatever. But the biggest thing is that we want to inspire them. So we want to create aspirational content, and that's been literally the one-liner since 2008. So I haven't changed that because of the times. I haven't changed that because now it's a hot thing to do. Yeah, none of it.
That's dope.
And I had the opportunity, right? Like I'm very, very glad to say, look, I try to keep it real from day one, and I was able to do that, to some degree. And like, that part to me is a lot more valuable than the check. It just is. And I get it. It doesn't pay bills, but guess what? It sort of does now, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. In the long
And
term, you will get the
it
checks.
does. Yeah. Like, and exactly. And that, so I know people always talk about this stuff and it's like, oh no, it doesn't do anything. Well, it sort of does, because you're able to command a higher premium for your work because
Yeah.
you've only dealt in that realm, you know? And it's really hard to sort of do the other way around, you know? And like when you get boxed and doing something, you know, mass market, and you're doing something,
Yeah.
you know, lower production or whatever it might be, you know, it's a whole different game, you know?
I think also like keeping and growing your audience, and especially there's a big difference between having just a passive audience who just comes and see things here and there, and the difference between people who really grow and support grow with you and support you throughout. And I think staying loyal to your brand and your vision really helps keep those core people that actually matter, right? It's not about just catering to everybody. It's catering to your specific audience. And I think that's why, you know, what you've done a really good job of keeping true to your brand and growing the core audience, not just like BS people who are ghost following you. I think that makes a big difference.
I hope so. You know, it's always been about people. Just for me personally, not even from a business standpoint or anything, it's been about people. And that's sort of been the driving factor for even like any philanthropic thing I do now, or like conversations that we have, like it's about the people, man. It really is. And if you can really just like focus on that part, everything else will sort of like figure itself out, you know? And we talked about like trajectory earlier, right? Like career paths and what happens when you do one thing and the second thing. Like that's really not in your control. It's really like, you know, it's always a person on the other end that's really in control.
It's true.
Right? I forget how old I was, but I wrote this one thing about like, you know, society being like a people's business, right? That like you ultimately, I wrote a thing about, you know, society being people's business, that ultimately like it's the people that get you to where you want to be.
It's
right?
true.
So how you treat someone, right? How you treat someone and how they treat you is the ultimate tell.
Yeah.
Right. If you want to vibe with someone, you know, it tells something about them. If you don't want to, that also tells something about them. But that's what it comes down to. It's nothing else, you know?
It's that's so true and so important. And it's interesting that you put it in that way of like, it's a people's business. And it's true, because on the other end, there usually is a person who's making the decision that has everything to do with your life or not, right? Either way, or you're the one making that decision for somebody else. And what you said before too was really important, is like how you treat people, and how you keep relationships. You just never know how that can play out for you or for somebody else, or what you say or do. You never know how that can affect someone else in some way. So you rather it be like a positive impact that you leave on somebody, or that someone gets some value from you in the long run, than have like a negative feeling. And I agree with that. Like I try my best to do the same. And I think that's why I really like you, and we get along, because I think that's so important. It really is. It's more important than my career. It's more important than anything else.
It is, because, you know, look, and you said like probably somebody on the other end. No, it's literally somebody on the other end, right? Even
Someone's
from
on the
like,
end.
Someone's literally on the other end for everything we do. It's from like the day you got into college, right? Somebody on the other end said yes.
Yeah.
You got into
school, for sure.
Your papers were graded, whatever. Somebody else, you know, decided, you deserve an A over a B plus, right? And so on. And then it gets into the career part. I mean, I talked about earlier about, you know, my boss and his decision. I mean, it's literally a people's decision. It's a person's decision. Nobody else. It's not like he had to like, you know, go to some like algorithm, or he had to go to like a group of people. It was one person who literally maybe defined my trajectory, right? To some degree.
Yeah.
And he has no idea.
It's true. Yeah.
Right.
He doesn't.
And that is no idea. And so like, that's a crazy sort of way to think about it. I think really it humbles you when you think about it. When you think about it from a one-to-one perspective.
Yeah.
It really will hone everything in. Doesn't matter how many followers you have or any of that shit. It really comes down to just one person, right?
It's wild.
And you, that's it. And that part is like, it's sometimes mind blowing, because I think about like one of our biggest clients I met on a train ride from New York City to Jersey. Just one time before this is after I had graduated and I had been in the city for something, and like I'm literally just riding a train down and back to Rutgers. And so we just connected. we added each other on LinkedIn and didn't really talk much outside of that. You know, we stayed in touch here and there, and never met with her, never hung out with her, whatever. But like years later, she's at an agency that's working with like BMW and a few other brands. And then I'm, you know, creating the content that I'm creating, right? And so she sees some of that and she's like, hey, like, you gotta meet this other team. You gotta meet the social media team at BMW, you know? And that's like years of work of working on automotive content, doing X, Y, and Z, to then being able to talk to the agency that's actually putting it out there, right? That's like, that was a game changer, you know? In a better lack of words, but like that part. And then like even after that, it was like she jumped into a bigger role and said, hey, I want, you know, I want your help on a couple of things. And now it's like an ongoing client that we have, you know, that and it's one of our biggest ones. And so things like that are like, you can't control that, you know?
You just but you say you did the work, you had the work. Like even if you had that relationship, if you didn't have the work to back it up, it's useless. So you did the work, you had the relationship, and then when you had the opportunity, you bagged it.
Yeah, man. I mean, lucked out for sure, because I think the timing was so impeccable. She had just gotten into this new role. She's like, hey, I'm working with like Kodak, I'm working with X, Y, and Z, you know, all these different things. Like, she actually wanted me to work on, she wanted Homme to be like an influencer for Kodak. Right? That's how the conversation started. She just called me and said, I want to like loop in Homme. I said, oh, let me tell you about what else we're doing. And I just shared some examples, just like, hey, this is some of the stuff, like, what do you think? You know, just get her feedback, because I know she's really good at that stuff. And I was like, let me just get some feedback from her. And she's like, oh, I need this. Like, I need this. What you're doing for them. She literally was like,
we need it. For them, we want it.
Yeah. And it's like 3 years ago. And so like Networkgray wouldn't be what it is today without our client. But that just, if we trail that back, you've got to trail it back to like 2009 on an NJ Transit ride from New York to Jersey. That's what you got to trail back to. And that's the crazy part.
That's wild.
And
you just don't know how things are playing.
We could do that for everything.
That's true.
Never. That's why it's so important. And again, it's not because you're doing it to gain something later. That's, you gotta treat people with respect, man. You gotta treat people with like true, like genuine care. And I think if you do that part, you know, it just, I don't know. It's
without always looking for something in return. Like you said that early on in our conversation, you don't need anything. Keep them relationships, and if something's meant to be, it's gonna come to you regardless.
I'll tell you this, I remember when I was a kid, I don't know what I said. My dad was like, he like snapped at me. He was like, what do you think? You're better than someone? Because you're not, you know? And I remember him distinctly saying this. This is like, I was like 9 years old now. I've like shook ever since. And I always sort of like looked at that and am reminded of it so often, because it's the reality. We are not better than somebody else. It doesn't matter, you know? And so like, the things that anger me, I think for me personally, like, you know, things that I will literally like maybe like go to war with is things where I feel like, you know, someone's being looked down upon, right? Like if I'm just standing somewhere and like there's one person here and then that person's like kind of like speaking in condescending tone, that to me, like, you've lost all respect from me. You know, that is one thing that I don't, it doesn't sit well for me. And, you know, and then it's the idea that like, you know, I see someone just, you know, I don't know, like, I keep giving examples. I don't want to even jump into it. It's just like, it's just, for us, I think you get it. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the part, man. Is like, I think if you treat people right and you understand that we're all like equal, like it doesn't matter what I have, it doesn't matter what car I drive. You know, I've gone on car drives where guys have like, you know, been really like protective of their cars and stuff like that. And they're just cars. You know, technically. And like, I love, and I'm like, yo, like if I have something that like, if I have something, you know, that I think could inspire someone just by them sitting in it, which is the reality, which is like, you know, some of the things that, you know, that happen, it's like that. Why not? Like, why not open the door? You know, I've done that. I do it all the time. I literally, if someone likes a dope car, I went to my barber just yesterday. And he's like, oh my gosh, your car, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, no doubt. Like, you know, come out, like, come check it out. You know, we literally like, let them sit in it, like started, do whatever you want, like, you know, enjoy it, like experience it, because, you know, that should be like a bit of it. Because for me, right, again, the core elements, you've got to inform people, you've got to educate people, you got to inspire people. And the inspiring part, it's a day-to-day thing. You've got to like really just do your best to like be the best reflection of like yourself, you know what I mean? Like your like upbringing, your like religious values, right? Like the things you really care about, where you've think you fall on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Like, be a good reflection of those things. You know, I feel like we're always like, because we're the minority, we're not looked at as like there's preconceived notions because there aren't many of us, and then so we are literally the walking examples, right?
Yeah.
And so like, that's why I would say treat people with respect, because if it was somebody else and they said something, they probably overlook it. But if it's like a brown guy doing it, right, in a negative way, then it's like, oh, all brown guys are like that. You know what I mean? And that part we've got to like dig out of, you know. And so it does require a bit more, you know, for us to do that. You know?
I believe that too, because it does suck to have that burden, but I believe the same thing, especially when like the whole post 9/11 world that we lived in. Like, I was like, yo, I want to make sure that whoever interacts with me, like, they get the best version of me. So then in their mind, they just think, oh, people who look like that are nice, normal, you know, normal people, just nice people, and not just have like, and it sucks that you have to do that, but I think it's an important part. It's an important role for everybody to do a little bit of that. And it's just better because like there might be somebody who looks like me, but can't communicate the way I do. And then they're screwed. So, but if they already have that in their mind, like, oh, cool, he looks like him and he must be a nice dude, that then I did something good. At least I did something good that day.
Yeah, man, I hope so. And there's so much, I think, you know, sort of like responsibility on us for that, and we don't realize it, right? And, and I don't say that for you or me. I just mean that as like in general for us, you know?
Yeah, it's true.
And so and that part, I hope like more people become more aware of, you know, 'cause I think that would, I don't know, just make it a better experience, man, for everyone.
It will. It just makes you a better person and better experience. I like that you threw in that dad example, because I think that's another thing that, I mean, now that we're moving to the next stage in life, it is important to try your best to help guide the next generation and tell them you ain't shit. Like, I
do that. I do it straight up. My little cousins, I tell them all the time, listen, you gotta move different, you know?
Yeah.
You know, you gotta play the game different. You gotta like really be like aware of how you're treating people. I like call them out for their bullshit, you know, like all the time. Cause I'm like, you're old enough now where I know you understand what I'm saying. You know, 10 years ago when you were little, maybe you didn't get it, but now you're old enough where like, if you don't get it today, maybe you'll get it 10 years from now, you know, 5 years from now. Maybe you'll get to a moment in life where like that subconscious sort of screams out, it's my voice. You know, like,
but like, Atif was right, man. Atif was right. I told you. All right. So going back to what we were saying, I think that because we started this discussion talking about, you know, your journey and your career. And I mean, you said that you didn't really have any pressure from your parents, and I know the answer, but like, how do your parents feel about what you do now?
That's a good question. Probably for the most part, they're probably clueless about what I do, right? Like still, right? That's probably like step
That's a
one.
good answer.
But you know, in terms of like sentiment, right? Like I think my mom, I'm sure she loves it. I always like show her stuff, or I try to. Actually, I don't show her as much as like other people might show her, right? My sister might like send a link or whatever and things like that, or like show an Instagram post or anything like that. And I always tell her where I'm going, obviously, right? So every trip, everything is like at FaceTime, I try to like showcase. So I do all those things. I'm sure that they enjoy that. My friend, so my cousins in the UK, right? My first cousins in the UK, always like tell me when my dad shares something, right, with the family, right? And so that's why I know that like I'm doing something that he's like, he actually wants to share, and he's been doing this for a long time, actually. It's kind of dope. And like for the last 10 years, I would say, like when Forum started in the early years, I remember like there was like a thing, I was on NewYorkMag.com or somewhere else. There's two places actually. NewYorkMag.com was one of them. And he sent a link to them. And like, I remember like when I first saw them again afterwards, like, oh, you think you're so cool with your website and stuff. And I know we said your dad, you know, your dad sent us a link and all these things. And so I know that they're like proud, you know, I know that. And I think it took me a long time to kind of realize that stuff. But yeah, my dad moves and sounds, man. He doesn't really, you know, I mean, he does now. He's a lot different now. You also understand now he has, you know, he has 2 kids after me, right? So there's 4 of us. He has my uncle's kids, right? Who are like, anywhere from like 13 to 19, right? So like, there's them. So then he's like sort of like softened up by them. So first my two sisters have softened him up, you know, and then like them four softened him, but now he has a granddaughter, right? So like now he has a niece. So that's another layer of like
changes
softness.
the whole game.
It changes the entire game. Yeah, like he's really come, you know, a tremendous amount of sort of like, you know, range. Yeah. And so, but you know, he just sent a link, like literally while we're sitting here, he sent like a link about, you know, I'll share this with you. I'll share a headline. I think it means something to what we're talking about. It's like Pakistan-born astrophysical, you know, astrophysicist Nagis Mavalvala. I can't even say that right. But anyway, she's named Dean of MIT School of Science, right? So Pakistani-born person, right? Female. Yeah. Pakistani-born female is now the Dean of the MIT School of Science, right? So that is the type of stuff he's sending now, right? So he's always like doing things which has always been the way he's always, it's a constant, right? Is that he always shares things and like this sort of like, hey, like this under a table, sort of like, hey, boom, here's something. And he always does it in a very casual way where it's not as much pressure on us. It's just sort of like, you know, absorb it and then do what we want with it. You know?
He's like, yo, this is what's going on in the world. So what are y'all doing?
Yeah, for sure. But he gets hype off of like my little cousin's doing something like Rehan, who's the youngest of the four. He just like sold his like, I don't know, he bought a laptop and like flipped it. Yeah. Or like a computer, like he bought a gaming computer and like flipped it for a little more money. Yeah. Like I got super excited for him. You know what I mean? Like
that's awesome.
You know, yeah, like he's a real fan, you know, which I really appreciate, you know, and I think that like that doesn't always happen.
That's really sweet.
Because on the other end of it though, parents that have met me, they're really inspired by the work, right? And like they love hearing what I do, and their son, their daughter says, hey, this is what he does. But I think a lot of times it's like, oh, but he's still not a doctor or lawyer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's a real thing. You know what I mean?
It is 100% a real thing.
Like to you, and this is like so humbling for me. This is why I appreciate we're having this conversation, because you say, yo, this is awesome that what you do, blah, blah. But then there's like, you know, there are parents that generation, not my own, luckily, but other families, other people in that generation that don't see the value yet, still till this day, you know?
Yeah.
And that part I think is like, it's not about the doctor or lawyer part. I think it's just about like allowing people to do what they really care about. Yeah. And I don't say that in this like, go follow your passion. And it just, that's too generic of a statement. Yeah. And I think that I try to look at the world from a more of a real, you know, a realist sort of lens. And the idea should be that, yes, for sure, you should find something you love. I wholeheartedly believe in that. And I'm a walking example of that, right? That I have found what I love. But the other layer that you should think about is that you should also ask yourself what lifestyle you want, right? Yeah. Like, what do you want your day-to-day to be? Yeah. Where do you want your flexibilities to be? Where do you want the financial comfort to be? Where do you not care it is, right? All these things. And also understand that if you're a brown guy trying to do what I did, you're gonna lose things in the process. You're gonna lose.
Or girl.
I mean, you could say that too, and maybe that's what I'm implying. But the idea is that you're gonna ultimately, you know, hit crossroads with people that don't see the world the same way you do. Yeah. And ultimately, they're 100%. Gonna have more power. Yeah, and they're gonna have more power in a situation than you are, and they're gonna look at you and be like, oh, you're not stable enough, right? Yeah. And that part, I think, is gonna be is something you need to be very, very aware of. Yeah. Right. That those trade-offs will have to happen at some point. Yeah. And they're going to be the result of you not going to get an MBA, you not getting a law degree, you're not getting, because that stuff is a lot easier in our culture, right? For parents to understand than what I'm doing or what you do or any of that stuff. And that stuff is no easy task, dog. It's not for the faint of heart, you know?
Nope.
And you know, and you're laughing because you might have gone through that to some degree. I don't know, you know.
Dude, try it when like I completely understand, because what we do more so now is a little bit more, there's a more awareness around it, because social media and stuff has become so common, and then everybody's mom, dads, and everybody's on social media. But when I first left medical school, trying to have that conversation with my parents, and then I was married already too, and trying to have the conversation with my in-laws, is just such a wild thing. And luckily, I mean, that's a long story, but even outside of that, it comes down to society and people really worrying about what other people are going to think. Because in general, like this is something that I touch up on quite a few times, is that when you're in medical school or something of that nature, everything is forgiven, right? If you don't come to family functions, if you don't have time for your parents, you don't have time for everything is forgiven. You don't make money, all of that stuff is forgiven. But when you go on the other end, and if you leave or you do something else, people don't give you that same sort of forgiveness, even if you're trying to work just as hard, because they can't connect the dots. Like, oh, I need to work this hard, right? I still need to work just as hard, but I'm just working toward a different goal. So, but people, because you're not doing that profession, they don't give you the same forgiveness. So I think that it's funny.
That is mind blowing, by the way. I've never heard that be said. And for me to hear that right now is crazy, actually. And I mean, it puts the world into a perspective, and I see it. You know what I mean? I see what you're saying, which is the craziest thing to me right now. So I'm a bit like blown by that, just so you know.
Well, I'm glad I said something, but it's just part of, well, it was definitely part of my reality, and it just is part of the reality that we live in, and they're shaped by their culture and what they've been brought up with, and hopefully the next generation does a little bit better job. But there's still people in our generation who on the surface say certain things, but they still feel the same way.
And I'm sure that exists too, you know. And I try to take things at face value, right? Like I'm only going to take what you say to me. Not that I can't see through bullshit, but I'm going to take it at face value for now.
Yeah.
And then if I sense anything else, then, you know, I'll make that decision in terms of what that means for our relationship or whatever later, you know? But I think the part about, I think what you've said is that, like, that also resonates is really like, I mean, the part that I think is really interesting is that you sort of found a loophole. I know you didn't want to leave. I know you didn't want to leave medical school at the time. I'm just saying, you actually played the card so well. Where like, yeah, I'm going to med school. Oh, look, I'm in it. Like, I'm here. Here I am. Psych. And it's like, I should have like, you know. And now I look back at it, you know, because we can't turn the clocks back right now. Yes, for sure. I know we spoke last week, and I was saying, hey, listen, like, times have changed, right?
Yeah.
The degree of how crazy it was when we were, you know, first jumping into this, and now I'm sure there are more parents that are more aware and okay with this stuff now than there were before. But it doesn't turn back the clocks, right? It doesn't change your trajectory. It doesn't change my trajectory. It doesn't do anything for me now. You know? And so those type of things are unfortunate, but those are things that, like, you know, I hope nobody has to deal with, right? But the reality is that people will still have to deal with them. Yeah, whether it's here or it's overseas or somewhere else, right? Where that hasn't, like, sort of caught up yet. Yeah, you know, those are all, like, those are all things that, you know,
it's part of our reality, and it's going to be there.
Yeah.
But that's why we're having these conversations. So hopefully one day somewhere, even if one person hears it and it helps them, either their parents see something different, or if it helps them see something different or figure something out, that'd be beautiful. Because one day the goal even of this is to have parents on it too, because I would love to get their perspective and to have an honest conversation with them too. Just so we need to get all perspectives, right? We need to get mine. That's why doctors should be on this too. I'm going to get a couple of doctors, some of my friends and my brother who is a doctor. I'm going to get them on too, just to get the whole picture. We need to see the whole picture.
Listen, man, I think having the parent part to me is like, it's like, that would be nuts.
It would be great to have conversation with you. Well, I'm glad.
To be honest, I'll say also, I think that, you know, it'll be therapeutic to some degree for them. Yeah. You know what I mean? To, like, because a lot of times parents hold things in and they don't get a chance to really speak to them, and nobody wants to listen to them. Now, if you come in and do it for, you know, with them, I think they're gonna let some things off their chest, right? That they probably normally wouldn't have. And I think that can be really, really eye-opening. It might change the entire dynamic of a relationship. You have no idea how powerful that conversation might be, you know? Yeah,
we'll find out.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I know that we're getting close to the time that you have to leave. The last question that I forgot to ask was, like, what advice would you give yourself, like your younger self, or, like, you know, what advice would you give some 10 to 15-year-old kid, or even like 18-year-old kid now that's trying to, like, figure it out?
Ah, man. So if I had to give some advice, I think again, centering around people, super important, right? Like try to help others, you know, and then in that process, I think you're going to be able to help yourself. So I'll give you examples like, um, you know, one of my bosses like from years ago would always think about the client and say, you know, yes, our work is important, but how can you help the other person win, right? The other
Yeah.
person is giving you the opportunity, the client. How can you help them win? Now you can achieve both, right? But the
Yeah.
opportunity is that you're able to like sort of like really center some things around them, you know,
Yeah.
and be able to say, okay, hey, this person, in order for her to get a promotion or for her to look really good, we've got to make sure this happens, right?
Yeah.
While also doing this big thing, we got to make sure this little thing happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's such a small little detail, but if you really think about things in that way, right, it'll change your entire like sort of like outlook on
Yeah.
how you do work, because that
That's really
part
good
will make
advice.
all the difference. I hope so.
Yeah.
I'll give you another example. I was on a call like a couple weeks ago with somebody that worked in production and video, like in like, you know, like TV production, like Netflix
Yeah.
and Hulu and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And she said that she was working on a campaign for, it was either Hulu or Netflix. I can't remember which one it was,
Yeah.
but she was working on a campaign for one of those two. And they knew, all the data said it, everything they knew, the show was going to be a flop,
Oh shit.
right? Right. They knew it. They already knew it was going to be great,
Yeah.
but it had a really strong lead actress. And their biggest mission, right, over the course of however many months or whatever it was to ensure that this person felt good, right?
Yeah.
It was to essentially ensure that, like, for example, you know, they knew where she lived, and so they would like make sure that the billboards within like a 1 or 2 mile radius
Yeah.
were showcasing the show, right?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
were making sure that, like, you know, there were little things being done around production time or during the regular flow of things to make sure she felt good, because ultimately the idea isn't just about that one show. It's about
Yeah.
future partnerships, future relationships,
Yeah.
etc.,
Yeah.
right? And so I that's a new semi-new learning for me in terms of the new, like, seeing it in a different
Yeah.
be done in a different way. But
Yeah.
it's a long thing that I've always tried to hold on to, which is that you've got to try to like make sure that you can help others win.
Yeah.
And, you know, me being now 33, I always think about that. And if you remember, like when I turned 33, I was like, oh, this is my Pippin year, because it's where I'm helping others win, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately that'll help me win. And
Yeah.
so it's a really, really big thing for me. It's a big theme for me. I try to create themes like in my head, you know, let it all play out like a movie in some ways, like just
Yeah.
like try to like be romantic about how life is sort of happening, but I'm sure it's like way more boring than it sounds. But really just thinking about it in that way where like you're trying to help others win, you know,
Yeah.
that's it. Just do that part. And if you can do that part and just put your win to the side for a second, I think it'll be good for you, you know, long term. So, you know, try to do that.
That's a beautiful
You know,
sentiment. I think that's beautiful advice. Got to help people win, and at the end, you'll win too. I
inshallah,
like it.
man, that's the thing. You know, and if you just do that right, man, it'll pay dividends for sure. You know,
Yeah.
I believe that. And for kids that are like just starting out, I think, you know, seek out mentors for sure. Seek out people that like are where you want to be, and then work with them. Because I have amazing mentors now. Like I
Yeah.
didn't have that before, but in the last couple of years, I've gained some tremendous ones. You know,
Yeah.
like CMOs at like Fortune 500 companies and stuff like that. And like these are major folks that have seen it. They've been through
Yeah.
it. They've climbed the highest mountains.
Yeah.
And so if you're able to find what your North Star is, what your end
Yeah.
goal is, and find someone that's already on that mountain, then why not, you know? And
Yeah.
I always have believed in thinking the future back. So like think about your end goal
Yeah.
and try to work systematically backwards from that to figure out the plan to achieve that.
Yeah.
Now, does it always work out? No. Also understand that like most of the plans that I made at 23 about me being 30 or 33
Yeah.
did not pan out, did not
Yeah.
happen,
That's
right?
very true.
Life looks drastically different than what I
Yeah.
envisioned at 30. And that's not a bad thing. I love my life.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah, I swear to you, I say this with like my entire soul. I love everything about my life, even the hardships, right? Even the
Yeah.
hard stuff,
It shapes
or
who you are.
mom or anything else. Yeah, absolutely. Like, all these things that these are things that like will ultimately shape you, like you said, and they'll guide you, you know?
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's super important as well, you know, is keeping that in mind. Yeah.
That's beautiful. That was great.
Yeah.
I have one final question before we close this off, and that is the most important question, which is, what is your favorite pizza spot?
Joe's Pizza, Carmine Street, like, you know what it is, you know?
Dude, it's so funny because Joe's on Bedford in Brooklyn is probably my go-to for a regular New York slice. So that is so we got good taste.
That's it, man. I keep it really simple. I fell in love with them a long time ago, you know, and it's one of those things, like, I don't need the crazy social media hype. I don't need, like, you know, the Prince Street vibes. And I love Prince Street, by the way. And but like, I just like Joe's, man. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
You know, pull up.
I
might find a parking spot. I might not, you know, like, I might just roll up in there real quick. I did the other day, actually. I literally, the crazy thing is, literally a couple days ago, like Tuesday, I think, Tuesday or Wednesday, I was there. Just literally parked up in the front, grabbed a slice, and I was out, you know?
Dude, I love that spot. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, man. Yeah, hell yeah, man. That's the spot.
All right, man, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy ass schedule and doing this with me. I really, really, really appreciate this. Thank you.
No, man. Listen, anytime, you know, if there's obviously any more that I could do, I'm here for that too. You know, but
before you go,
appreciate that.
Sorry, before you go, one more, like, if someone needs to get in touch with you, if they want to pick your brain or they just want to have a conversation, how should they get in touch with you? Because we know email is shit. What? Oh, there we go.
Oh, yeah.
we know email is a little tricky. Or, like, honestly, what's the best way of people to hit you up?
So I would say it depends on what the purpose is, right? You know, but I think the best, most generic way, and the way that you'll still be heard, I know it sounds crazy, but email really will be the best way. Like, yeah, you can follow me on Instagram and stuff, but like, if you shoot me a DM, I might catch it, you know, if you're like in the dark DM area or whatever. But really, like, if you shoot me an email, not, you know, 10 out of 10 times I'm going to respond. It might be in a couple days, but like, you'll get a response from me. And it's just, this is my first name at my full name.com. So it's Atif at AtifKazMi.com. You know, like, super, super, like, easy to remember, I hope.
It is.
That's where you find me, you know what I mean? And like, I'm happy to have any conversations, you know. The picking your brain part is always very, very interesting. But like, for example, you know, that's a whole nother private conversation. But if you're like, you know, if you're in college, or if you're looking for career advice, if you're just starting out, like, I would love to have those conversations.
Yeah.
If you're going through a career pivot, I'd love to talk to you, you know, anything really. I mean, I'm super open, you know, with that. And I try to be as like selfless with my time as I can be. Just know that, like, you know, it's not perfect always, you know. I just got done, man. Like, literally, you know, like, I'm like not even 24 hours removed from just helping launch a nonprofit, like, just yesterday. And so I had been super sort of like, you know, tight with that. And now I can have some breathing room, you know? And so it's been great, you know, in that regard. But, you know, creators will create, right? We're all going to find time. We're all going to find things to like either find more time to create things, or we're going to find more time to make time, you know, for what we want to do. And for me, genuinely, I want to make time to help people and hopefully guide them if I can. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we all really appreciate that, man. Thanks again.
Oh, man.
I am really happy we got to do this, and I'm pumped. I'm really, really happy we did this.
No, likewise, man. I can't wait to hear the final product, man.
All right. I'll talk to you really soon.
All right, brother. I'll see you.
All right, bye.